Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the Ask Videomail for the week of April 21st, 2014. Welcome to the site to you new members and welcome back to the old. Don't forget the Ask Videomail is your chance to get your question in character animation or performance answered in a video just like this one, but I need your question if I'm going to answer it, so please send them to webmaster at KennyRoy.com. I go through all the questions. I answer the ones that I think will help the most people. There's no such thing as a stupid question, and it is the best way to get the most out of the site. I am having a good time. I hope you are as well. This is a very exciting day. I know it probably means very little to you guys, but put an offer on a house and it was accepted today. We opened escrow and we are on our way. 30 days, hopefully everything goes right, and we will be moving in. So yay for me. I'm super excited today because I'm also going to be announcing Collabs 2014 next week, and that is I don't want to give anything away other than the fact that we are doing one this year. It's going to be bigger and better and even more exciting. I just today figured out one of the stepping stones, one of the obstacles in doing it this year, and everything is on a straight shot. So that's very exciting to me. Let me think. Besides that, pretty much nothing too out of the ordinary. Keep an eye. Just do yourself a favor. Keep an eye on the Facebook and the Twitter account, because I will be also doing things like announcing I have some projects that are coming up this summer. So can always use great animators. If that's you, then just keep an eye on those things so I can hire you. All right. Also, it's a good idea to just always consider me like you would like any other studio that you would apply to. Just like kind of like on a regular basis. I used to apply to like all the major studios. Like right when I began in animation, I would apply to all the major studios just kind of like once a year. Keep me updated with your demo reel so that I have it on hand. I have a database that I go through when it's time to hire. Sometimes it's too much time. This is something that some people don't realize, but sometimes it's too much time to put a job posting and go through like 50 emails for that one job. Sometimes it's easier to have a database that you go through and you've ordered and you know exactly where everyone's skill level is, and staff your project that way and make like 2 or 3 phone calls and say like, hey, are you available right now? What's your rate? Can you work? Blah, blah, blah. Right? Rather than having to sort through just like a ton of stuff. So a lot of times, and I know I'm not alone in this, a lot of times people will actually do a sort of like a hiring with basically just like take like people that they have like a database and staff a project totally like that. All right, so make sure I have your stuff. All right, that's basically the point. Let's check out this week's question. Good question, my friend. Ricard. I never know if it's Richard or Ricard. Sorry. Ricard, maybe you can correct me. I know I said Richard in the announcement for the Ask Videomail March Madness contest, and you turned in a hell of a lot of questions, so thank you for that. But point is, what is the point? Point is that we have a duty as animators to be always thinking about composition. We want to be the kind of animator that a director is kind of like, you know what, I can trust this guy to kind of like completely take over this shot. I can trust them to be like a real kind of like powerhouse, if I give them sort of like camera direction, if I give them just like loose direction, they can run with it and roll with it. And the rule of thirds, I wanted to kind of just let's start with the basics. I will go further into maybe a composition lecture at some point, but I'm glad you brought up the rule of thirds because some people haven't even heard of this. Basically, what the rule of thirds does is this. Let's take a look. What the rule of thirds basically says is if you have a composition that you should never frame up like your subject right in the middle, that it's much more interesting to have to break up the image into 3 sections, both horizontally and vertically, so you get 9 quadrants, and you want to have your interest basically along these lines, and you want to have your focal points at these intersections. Okay, that's basically what the rule of thirds kind of says in a nutshell. Okay, now why is that important? Why do we need to know that? Well, if you look at like a composition, you have all of the things that affect a composition that affect like your animation, like your pose and your timing and whatever. Like we're trying to always at all times kind of avoid things like symmetry, avoid things like twinning. And if you look at a composition that has basically the subject is like front and center, and there are no points of interest that are outside of that. Well, I mean, it kind of is symmetrical about a point, or it's twinned on either side, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so the rule of thirds is basically, it's very simple to do. It's almost so simple that it seems like cheating, and there are other like compositional things that you can be aware of, like assembling in things in triangles, and the golden ratio, where you have points of interest that you can follow that actually like swirl in like a nautilus shell. I mean, all those things, we can go into those, and maybe I'll start putting those things in into our into a lecture on this subject. But either way, any way you look at it, the real kind of issue here is how do we go about accessing this? How do we go about seeing this in a composition that we're working on? Okay, and the answer is pretty simple. Well, there's a few ways. Let me show you a few ways. Okay, let's switch over to Maya. Okay, so we have Maya here, and what I'd just like to show you is a couple ways that you can get a nice guide for your rule of thirds. One way you can do it is you can add an image plane, and I think you guys all know how to add an image plane, but if you don't, and I don't have one because this is not the way that I normally do it, but you would go to View, Image Plane, and then Import Image, and then you would just have your image. You could do it in Photoshop, you could do it in Paint, whatever, and then it would be on top of your camera. There's 2 reasons why I don't like to use the image plane to add like a rule of third guide on the screen. The first reason is that it's kind of hard to show, and it's kind of hard to show and kind of hard to hide. Okay, you'd have to go to show, turn on and off cameras. Every once in a while, you want to actually be able to see your camera and not see the image plane guide. The other way you could select it is you could go into the hypershade, and then you could go to your cameras, and then you would select it, and then go into the attribute editor and hide it. It actually is kind of cumbersome, and it's not like something that you can see in the outliner super simply. Okay, so I don't actually like using the image plane. Okay, I like either creating a guide object or using the grease pencil. So let me show you those two ways to create a rule of thirds guide on your composition. Okay, I'm going to just create a plane, okay, and we're going to change the subdivisions to be what we need, which is just 3 by 3 instead of 10 by 10, okay. Then we're going to change the scale to be 1.920 by 1.080. I just made it 1920 by 1080 basically, okay. You see that? And if we change our default is HD, right? So if we change it and we turn on our guide here to 1920 1080, and then we frame it up, you know, it doesn't have to be exact. If you want it to be exact, you can. Let me just do this. I'm going to select my camera, rotate -90, rotate Y 0, and then make translate Z0. Okay, so now I can zoom out and just line this up perfectly. So there it is, right? All right. So there we have our guide. Okay. So so we have our rule of thirds here. So all you'd have to do is show the camera, select it in the outliner, hit Shift H, and then grab the plane, grab the camera, and hit P. And now my camera has a rule of thirds guide on it. Okay? So, I mean, how simple is that? You don't like it? Just grab it, Control H, it's hidden. You want to show it again? Go and do the outliner, just show it again. Okay, or Control H, Control Shift H shows last hidden. And you're not doing much hiding in an animation scene, are you? Not really. Not really. Normally we're using display layers, and those things are normally built into the rigs and into our animation scene. We're not normally hiding things. So you might actually be able to get away with hitting Control H and then Control Shift H to show it again. Okay, so here we have it. I mean, how long did that take? No time at all. Otherwise, you can use a grease pencil, and if you have a steady hand, you can just freehand it. What I like to do is I take a ruler and I put a ruler on my Wacom tablet. Add a frame, right? Put a ruler on my Wacom tablet. Okay, find the top here, and then draw with the ruler. The ruler slid a little bit, no big deal. Okay, I'll turn it sideways. And let's just make sure that it's nice and straight. Oops. That didn't work. Okay, using the ruler. Again, this doesn't have to be exact. I'm kind of a little, of a perfectionist, so I normally will try to make mine exact. But yours doesn't need to be. Oops. Ruler keeps on sliding. There we go. All right. So there you have the grease pencil. Now, we don't always have the outliner showing. So let me hide that, right? So we don't always have the outliner showing, which if you are full screen or you're using a panel layout like this and you don't have that outliner showing, well, it's just as simple as going to show and turning off grease pencil, right? And this menu is always here, right? This menu up here, that's always showing. Actually, I've hit it accidentally sometimes, and I had to search online for like 10 minutes trying to figure it out. I haven't lost it since then, but anyway. So here we have like the exact same kind of like convenience as that helper object. Okay. There's one last way. If you use this is the field guide. And you can basically kind of approximate how many sections it is, because it's 12 fields or 12 fields. 12 fields in either direction. Okay, so ostensibly this is 24 across, so it's 8. It's 4 in either direction, right? So here's a line. This 4 is a line. Right, and this 4 is a line. So you can use this to sort of eyeball it. It's just not really as nice. Actually, let me turn on. I'm being stupid. Here we go. So this 4 is a line, this 4 is a line, this 4 is a line, and this bottom 4. So you have the same thing kind of like readily available to you, but the field chart, I mean, there's so much clutter. It's really not very nice to look at all. Okay, so I'm really glad you brought this up, Ricard. I hope it's Ricard. I sound like a jerk if I keep on mispronouncing somebody's name. I'm going to make this little horizon. It doesn't just mean framing up objects. Okay, this is kind of like the last point that I want to make. Like if you're going to frame this up, like this is not quite enough, right? Because still there's something kind of like a little wonky with this composition. I would say that the biggest shapes or the biggest contrast on screen should be featured kind of the most. So what does that mean? Let's say this is a tree, okay? And it's way far off in the distance. Come on, tree. Work with me. All right. Let me scale this thing. Oops. What happened there? That was weird. Okay. So here's my tree. I'll make a couple more, just so that we have some interest on the horizon. Okay. And then I'm going to just make this just, kind of feel like a little bit of a landscape, okay? So we're going to have, normally in a composition, we're going to turn this field guide off. Jeez. Okay. We're going to have a lot of compositional elements to consider. It's not just your character or whatever, right? So that being said, it's more important, I feel, to look at what are the major contrasting elements, and if it's like this burning sky with this gorgeous sunset happening back here, and sort of a little bit bland landscape with maybe like one object, well, it's probably a little bit nicer. Let's see if I can frame this, where you have something like this, right? Satisfying your rule of thirds by having the subject, on one of these intersection points, and then the horizon, this nice ratio of sky to ground, right? So let me turn off the grease pencil, and you'll see. Right? This feels like a lot better composition than what we had before. Okay, it's as easy as I'm doing it, though. I mean, it really is. Kind of like, play around. Find you want the horizon down here, You could do this as well, right? And now, again, these are all rules of thumb. These are all guidelines. None of these are, like the triangular composition, the golden ratio, or the rule of thirds. None of these are do or die. None of these are you're a horrible animator, you're a terrible filmmaker, you'll never make it in this town if I have anything to do with it. None of it is like that. Okay, these are just ways for you to get sort of, what it is. It's biological. It's like programmed into human beings. And someone discovered this, someone figured this out, and they shared it with everybody, and it's just like, that's good to know. Okay, I get it, and move on with it, okay? So what I don't want to see is I don't want everybody to be throwing up these third guides and like everything is freaking glued, like staple gunned, like to these lines, all right? None of that. That's not how this is supposed to be used. It's supposed to be just like a little bit of a head start on getting an interesting composition quickly and then moving on from there. To be honest, doing all of this, knowing all of this, knowing the rule of thirds, knowing all of the compositional tricks that I've mentioned so far in this video, will get you like 25% there. The rest will actually be the camera movement, the character movement in performance, silhouette, texture, realism, all that stuff that is in the animation itself is really going to bring the other 75%, right? Kind of how it starts and how it's like kind of stacked up. That's only just the beginning, okay? But fun to look at and good to know. I hope those ways that I showed you, helper object, grease pencil, field guide, are helpful, and use them. Try them out. See if maybe you've instinctively created some shots using the rule of thirds already. If you have any more questions, you know where to send them, webmaster@kennyroy.com. I'm here for you. This has been a good time. Thanks a lot. Good luck with your animation. And as always, rock on.